Just because you've done something bad doesn't make you bad. This is one of the most important quotes in all of Omori. And I think that a major theme throughout all of Omori is forgiveness. And this quote, like, especially supports it because it's saying that just because, you make one mistake and it might be a bad decision, it does not define who you really are. Forgiveness is what Sunny was looking for throughout the entire game from his friends, family, but most importantly, from himself. For so many years, he suffered, closed himself off, all because of this one mistake he made. That is the truth. Even though he knew it was an accident and he didn't mean for any of it to happen, he still blamed himself for the whole thing, and he made it his entire identity, defining himself all up from this one moment that was in a mistake. It wasn't until Sunny saw that his friends were willing to support him and that they'd always be there for him, that he was just a normal person, just like everyone else, that he was able to realize that he in fact was not this useless and horrible person that was a murderer and everything. No. It wasn't until all of that that he realized that this day of the truth was simply just a mistake. Although it was a horrible one, it was still just an accident that Sunny never meant or wanted to happen. Showing that, just because he did a bad thing doesn't mean he's a bad person. And after he realizes all of this is when he's finally able to forgive himself and move on in life from his past actions, fully putting his trust into his friends to forgive him. Basil is another character that seeks forgiveness throughout all of Omori, but he's specifically mostly looking for forgiveness from Sunny because he's like a major player in the truth. Like he's pretty much like what made the second half of it happen. And because Sunny's his best friend, he's like, please, best friend, bestie, please forgive me. After seeing Marie get pushed down the stairs by his best friend Sunny, Basil just did not want to believe it. He wanted to save his friend from any trouble, so he decided and helped Sunny stage her death as a suicide, which in hindsight ended up causing even more trouble than before, and this in turn causes a lot of guilt and shame in Basil for very obvious reasons. But we all know that at the end of the day, Basil was really just trying to help Sunny, despite it being like a really bad decision. He just wanted to save him from the already desperate conditions he was in, and he never meant to cause him so much trouble, which is why he seems to apologize to Sunny a lot for it. Like, I think it's a scene near the end of the game. He's like, sorry for causing you so much trouble and stuff. And yeah. And I feel like at the end of the game, the only reason Basil was like able to forgive himself and his actions was because Sunny forgave himself and him first, which is why at that secret ending scene, we kind of see Sunny's something go away first, and then we see Basil's go away. Basil, he did a bad thing, alright? Let's admit it. It was a terrible decision. But he was never a bad person. Once again, we see another character defining themselves by one little moment of their lives. Although it was a very major and pivotal moment in their lives, they're just defining everything about them just by this thing. And sure, it was horrific, right? But in the end, it does not define them, and it doesn't make them bad people for doing one bad thing. I mean, Basil feels like a whole bunch of guilt and shame from this, and if he really was a bad person, he would not be feeling this guilt and shame. He would just be like, whatever, man. But Basil was never a bad person. That's what I'm trying to say. But anyway, this just goes to show how important forgiveness and doing a bad thing doesn't mean you're a bad person is in Omori. Aubrey went through a lot in her life, especially after the truth, and because of all of this, she eventually ends up becoming quite the angry person as we see in the game, and she does several questionable things like bullying Basil and pushing him into the lake even though it was accidentally, and she acts very, I guess, rude towards a lot of people, and specifically towards her old friends. She really does not like them and tries to cut all ties with them. And she was not the best person after the truth. And after a few encounters with her old friends, I know I'm skipping a lot, but after a few encounters, she like realized that, hey, my behavior has not been the best. It has not been good. But despite all of her actions, her friends end up forgiving her, and they decide to stay friends because they're like, friends are supposed to be there for each other. Hiro feels guilty after the truth because since he was the oldest of the bunch, he felt that he should have been there and taken care of everyone else because they were all way younger. Not only that, he also feels a bit guilty because of Marie's alleged suicide. He's like, I should have been there, but it wasn't actually a suicide. And at the time the game takes place, I'm pretty sure he's already been forgiven by his friends. Like, no one really blames him for anything. But I still think like he still needs to forgive himself because he still blames himself for a lot of stuff we see. And he's like, I should have been there. And yeah, he still needs to forgive himself. And I think finding out the truth at the end of it would help him. But like, it might still put him in a bad place mentally. But we don't know. But I feel like it would help him because he'd be like, oh, it wasn't really actually my fault. And yeah. But I'll be honest, Hiro isn't really like the best example of this quote because he doesn't do anything bad. He's a good boy. He doesn't do anything horrible. So he's just a good person. Kel, like Hiro, doesn't really do anything remotely bad in Omori. Like, the only bad thing I could see about him is his simple-mindedness, and which seems to cause some trouble sometimes. Like when he tried to comfort Hiro, he said like he tried to comfort him, but he was like in a really bad place and he ended up lashing out at him. And also with Aubrey, like his like simple-mindedness really caused a lot of conflict between the two during that period of time between the truth and the time the game takes place. And although I don't really see it as a bad thing since it's just kind of his personality, it's just who he is, he can't really do much about it, I don't think. But he does sometimes feel like guilty and insecure about it. But despite his carelessness, his friends are still willing to forgive him and be friends with him, and they see he isn't a bad person, he's just trying to help. But it just his like simple-mindedness kind of does things and I guess comes off as annoying sometimes. Marie is pretty much the driving force of forgiveness in Omori, specifically for Sunny's self-forgiveness. Throughout the game, we see Marie supporting Sunny and encouraging him, especially when he's facing his fears like his somethings. And despite Sunny being the cause of Marie's death, her spirit seems to support and have forgiven Sunny, encouraging him to forgive himself and to tell his friends the truth. She knows that Sunny isn't a bad person. He didn't mean what happened, and by seeing this, she's able to forgive him. And I'm pretty sure because like it's her brother, obviously. But despite like being the cause of her death, she's still able to forgive him. She can see that he's not a bad person, and it was simply just a mistake. So in the end, forgiveness is one of the most important themes in Omori, and a very big part of the characters being able to forgive each other for their actions is seeing that yes, they did a bad thing, but that does not mean they are a bad person. One bad action does not define them, and what defines them is who they really are. With all this being said, it's understandable to be frustrated and angry and even hate someone for doing a bad thing, since that bad thing can cause a lifelong trauma like in Sunny's case, or other long-term pain. But I feel that holding on to this hatred would only make things worse for all parties involved, and I think it's important to be able to forgive others and maybe even give them a second chance, unless they're obviously like a bad evil person. Then don't forgive them, I guess. But anyway, like Kel said, just because you did a bad thing doesn't mean you're a bad person. One bad action does not define you, so don't beat yourself up in despair. Learn from it, grow, and move on, just like your boy Sunny did. Although, it did kinda cost him an eye.